welcome back. We're so excited that you joined us once again. We are in the middle of Daniel. We're on part 4 in our Daniel series, and we're on Daniel chapter 4. And we're pretty excited about this one. It's kind of a little bit of a plot twist with Nebuchadnezzar. You kind of maybe have a premonition something's coming up in his character, but this one's really kind of a surprise. Yeah. And I have to say that after studying more and more in the Bible, especially the book of Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar is becoming one of my favorite Bible characters. I know, I'm a little extreme, a little bit maybe narcissist, but I think he's pretty fantastic because I don't know of many people who could have that kind of leadership and reputation and experience what we're going to talk about today. And then still come out with such a humble character. And I just really admire that. And yeah, I'm pretty excited to meet him in heaven. So he's probably on one of my top lists can't wait to talk to. Nebuchadnezzar.
He's pretty cool.
But let's start with prayer and then we'll get into it. Dear Lord, I praise you so much for another wonderful evening to spend time in your word. And Lord, we just ask for your Holy Spirit, and we ask for your Holy Spirit to be present with everyone who is listening to this. Lord, may they hear the words and the encouragement. Lord, may this be an encouragement to them this evening. Whatever they're facing, Lord, give them courage and help them to know that you long to have a beautiful testimony in their lives. And we just surrender this time to you. In your name, amen.
Amen.
All right, so Daniel chapter 4, Nebuchadnezzar's second dream. Nebuchadnezzar the king, to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you.
Okay, right from the bat, there's this is a really cool chapter because this is like this chapter is written by Nebuchadnezzar. So Daniel came to him and say, "Hey, bro, can you write me a chapter in this book that I'm writing?" And I think this is the only chapter that it's a whole chapter that is written by a non-Jew, at least in the Old Testament. And it's Nebuchadnezzar writing about his story.
Yeah. And I think also you just already see kind of a tonal shift. It says, to all people, nations, languages that dwell on the earth, peace be multiplied to you. And this seems a lot different from the I'm going to turn your houses into ash heaps type of Nebuchadnezzar that we saw.
Cut you into pieces.
Cut you into pieces, cast you in a fiery furnace. Like, peace be multiplied to you. That sounds like, a New Testament type of greeting. So already we kind of see this shift in character, and we're going to see it even more as we go on.
And what I think is really interesting is saying to all people, nations, languages that dwell on all the earth. Like this is in the part that is in Aramaic, which is to evangelize. That's the purpose of these chapters. And Nebuchadnezzar, the king, is also saying, this is to everybody. This is my story for everybody.
Yeah.
I thought it good to declare the signs and wonders that the Most High God has worked for me. How great are his signs and how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. Now, if you just asked me what book that was from, I'd instantly tell you, it's Psalms. That sounds like King David.
Yeah.
It's not. It's King Nebuchadnezzar sounding like David. Wait, what? A man after God's own heart? But it's just beautiful language, declaring the signs. Signs and wonders, beautiful.
So there's really something that happened here.
Yeah.
We'll have to see what happened. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in my house and flourishing in my palace. I saw the dream which made me afraid, and the thoughts on my bed and the visions of my head troubled me. Therefore I issued a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. Then the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers came in. And I told them the dream, but they did not make known to me its interpretation.
It's really interesting that they didn't make known the interpretation, because usually that's what they did. They made interpretations from dreams, and either it was because they didn't know, or maybe because Nebuchadnezzar himself was afraid of this, like he didn't know, so maybe they were afraid that they know that this could be something mean or bad towards Nebuchadnezzar, so they didn't want to get on his bad side.
Well, if you've noticed, Nebuchadnezzar kind of has a pattern. You take him off, there might be an ash heap waiting. So therefore, I think this is probably a sign that there's a premonition that, this is not a good dream, and I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, so I'm just going to be quiet. So then he kind of wakes up, and he's like, but at last Daniel came before me. His name is Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God. In him is the spirit of the holy God. And I told the dream before him, saying...
So I think one point that stands out to me from this is that he calls the magicians, astrologers, Chaldeans, soothsayers, all these different people before he calls Daniel. And when he first addresses Daniel, he says that he named him Belteshazzar according to the name of my God, which I'm pretty sure was Marduk. And so from the beginning we see that at this point in the story, Nebuchadnezzar views this Hebrew God as just another one of many options. Like, yes, he's had experiences in the past, like with the dream and with the fiery furnace, but at the same time, you know, like he's going to turn to these other gods, these other ways of figuring his problems out before he turns to this Hebrew God. And so we can see that right now it's just another one of the options to him.
What I think is really cool about the names especially is that in his testimony that is happening, he's writing this after experience, he's calling him Daniel. And that is his original name with the living God.
Yeah.
But when he's talking, like, when he's quoting himself and calling Belteshazzar, so something happened here, and even though Daniel got the name Belteshazzar in chapter 1, he still kept his character, which was represented by his name. And that is really important when people try to force character traits on you that are not good, that you, if you stay true to yourself, then other people will also recognize that eventually.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful when you think about the fact, because he's like, I want everybody to know, no confusion, it's Belteshazzar. But Belteshazzar is the name after my God, but this one was the name after his God.
Yeah.
You know, like this was his reputation, and this is the man that I told the dream to.
Yeah.
Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy God is in you, and no secret troubles you. Explain to me the visions of my dream that I have seen in its interpretation. I just love that there's no secret that troubles you, because I think often as Christians, sometimes we struggle with not understanding why things happen.
Yeah.
And we're like, this is just too hard. And I think, unfortunately, the biggest reason a lot of people leave God is because there's this lack of communication. It's just like this big, hard, dark time in their lives that's like this secret that was unrevealed, the purpose. And so it just is something that they can't wrestle with. And Daniel, even though there's got to be lots of unanswered questions, did his family really have to die? Did he really have to go through this? Did his nation really have to go through this? But instead, you don't see that. It's just he purpose in his heart, and that character shines through so much to even the greatest man in the time in the world right now is respecting and recognizing that, hey, you don't seem unsettled by the uncertainties in life.
I also think this is not really as related to your point, but Nebuchadnezzar sees that the spirit of the holy God is in Daniel, and yet he doesn't really connect that he can have that as well. Like, he recognizes that other people, like Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, have this relationship with like this holy God, but he doesn't really connect that he's also able to have that same type of personal connection with God. And we're really going to be seeing as we move on that God is really trying to move in his life so that he can also have a relationship with him.
And that is how many people feel, actually, like, oh, well, my pastor is the only one who can read the Bible, or I will live on my parents' faith or whatever, like, but God wants to have something personal with us, just as he had it personal with Daniel, that he will have it personal with Nebuchadnezzar in the end of the chapter, and he also wants with everyone have a personal connection, that the spirit of him will be in each and every one of us.
All right, verse 10. These were the visions of my head while on my bed. I was looking, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew and became strong. Its height reached to the heavens, and it could be seen to the ends of all the earth. Its leaves were lovely, its fruit abundant, and in it was food for all. The beasts of the field found shade under it. The birds of the heavens dwelt in its branches, and all flesh was fed from it. I saw in the visions of my head while on my bed, and there was a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven. He cried aloud and said thus, chop down the tree and cut off its branches, strip off its leaf and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts get out from under it, and the birds from its branches. Nevertheless, leave the stump and roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze. And the tender grass of the field, let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let him graze with the beast. On the grass of the earth, let his heart be changed from that of a man. Let him be given the heart of a beast, and let 7 times pass over him. This decision is by the decree of the watchers, and the sentence by the word of the holy ones, in order that the living may know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, gives it to whomever he will, and sets over it the lowest of men. This dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now you, Belteshazzar, declare its interpretation, since all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known to me the interpretation. But you are able, for the spirit of the holy God is in you.
So I guess just to recap what's happening here, Nebuchadnezzar's recounting his dream to Daniel. Basically, he sees this big tree, and it's laden with fruit, and animals are kind of given shade under it. And then all of a sudden, this messenger from heaven says that they need to cut down the tree, and except that they're going to leave the stump and the roots in the ground with this band of iron and bronze. And then it kind of switches into kind of personifying this tree as a person, saying, let his heart be changed from that of a man, let him be given a heart of a beast, let 7 times pass over him. And then it's talking about this decrees from God. And so we already see that Nebuchadnezzar sees that this probably has a lot of personal application to himself, and that it's a direct message from God. And I think it also goes to show that he has faith in Daniel's connection with God, because he says, for the Spirit of the Holy God is with you. You are able to make the interpretation known to me. And so he has faith that this God, who he's believing is communicating with him, will be able to make known, just like he did before, like this prophecy with Daniel.
Which I think is encouragement to us as Christians, because it shows that even if our friends or our families aren't interested in God, if you have that connection with them, they can recognize it. And as we have that connection with the Spirit of the living God, of the Holy God, then other people are like, hey, you have it. And I know I can trust you. Maybe I don't understand why all these things happen in my life, but I know that I can trust that you have a connection with God. And so therefore, I'm going to ask you the hard questions. So for those of us who have people that we're concerned about, just keep trusting that if you stay close to God, people can see that God is in you, even if they haven't chosen for themselves to accept the God yet.
And that's just what Nebuchadnezzar did in the previous chapters. Like, he could see something special there. And as we mentioned in the previous episode, that's important for your conversion, like to see something in someone else, that it's not only knowledge, it's real in someone else too.
All right, verse 19. Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was astonished for a time, and his thoughts troubled him. So the king spoke and said, Belteshazzar, do not let the dream or its interpretation trouble you. Belteshazzar answered and said, my lord, may the dream concern those who hate you, and its interpretation concern your enemies.
So this is really interesting, because Daniel kind of understood what this meant immediately, and then he was troubled. You can see in his face how it's like, no, this is not good. And then Nebuchadnezzar really wanted to know, so it's like, no, like, don't let it trouble you, tell me, I really need to know. Just shows that Nebuchadnezzar recognized this was something important.
I think on the other, like the reverse side, you see that Daniel has a large amount of care and concern for Nebuchadnezzar, and it's evident, he says, oh, my lord, may the dream concern those who hate you, and its interpretations concern your enemies. Like, this guy probably had a hand in basically ruining Daniel's life. Like, he can't have kids, he won't see his family ever again, like, his entire nation has been taken into captivity, and yet you can see that Daniel genuinely cares for Nebuchadnezzar. And I think that, like you were saying, like that connection and that care is what makes Nebuchadnezzar willing to hear something that might not be necessarily very good.
Yeah, and I think it's important too to realize that as Nebuchadnezzar is telling this story, as we often do, sometimes we switch into third person and sometimes first person. So if you look, he's saying I, and then now he's saying then Daniel, and he's talking like from an outside perspective. And so I think understanding that, in those times he did call Daniel by the changed name. But when he's writing this as a whole, his whole testimony, he recognizes Daniel as Daniel. But that doesn't mean he always called him Daniel in front of his courts.
And another thing that ties back to Daniel caring about the king, saying all these concern those who hate you, like the other Chaldeans and everything, they were too afraid. Because they kind of were afraid for their own sake, but Daniel was afraid for Nebuchadnezzar's sake.
All right, verse 20. The tree that you saw, which grew and became strong, whose height reached to the heavens, and which could be seen by all the earth, whose leaves were lovely, and its fruit abundant, and which was food for all, under which the beasts of the field dwelt, and whose branches the birds of the heaven had their home. It is you, O king, who have grown and become strong, for your greatness has grown and reaches to the heavens, and your dominion to the end of the earth. Inasmuch as the king saw the watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven, and saying, chop down the tree and destroy it, but leave its stump and roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze, and the tender grass of the field. Let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let him graze with the beasts of the field, till 7 times pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king. They shall drive you from men, Your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make you eat grass like oxen. They shall wet you with the dew of heaven, and 7 times shall pass over you, till you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and gives it to whomever he chooses. Inasmuch as they gave the command to leave the stump and roots of the tree, your kingdom shall be assured to you, after you come to know the heaven rules. Therefore, O king, let my advice be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by being righteous, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor. Perhaps there may be a lengthening of your prosperity.
So I guess to also recount this explanation now, Daniel's saying basically this tree represents you, and you're going to be, in a sense, chopped down. Like God will preserve you, but for a time you're going to be driven out, and you're going to basically go crazy and behave like a cow or oxen. But he's saying that, this is a conditional. This isn't saying this is going to happen, this is going to happen. This is a conditional statement. Kind of like with Jonah warning Nineveh. He's saying, if you're able to break off from your sins and start being righteous, if you're able to start showing mercy to other people, then maybe this won't happen to you. And so it's not a curse from God, but it's saying, if you're able to change your ways, you might be able to avert this.
And it's really cool how this, especially verse 27, shows how much Daniel cared for Nebuchadnezzar. Like, oh king, just please listen to me.
Yeah.
Do this, and maybe you'll reign longer. And it's a contrast to when Jonah went and preached to Nineveh, which also is this conditional prophecy. And when Jonah preached, he mostly preached like, oh, just this is gonna happen to you, you're all gonna die and stuff. And they eventually turn away from that life, and God saved them because it was a conditional prophecy. And now Daniel is pleading towards Nebuchadnezzar, don't do this, please, my friend. And
I think that just goes to show, in our interactions with our friends, sometimes just saying nice things all the time isn't the way to be the most loving. Because Daniel cared, he was willing to tell the king the truth. Oh, you need to change what you're doing, otherwise this is going to happen. And a lot of times we don't want to be the bearer of bad news, or we don't want to step on any toes. But I think that we miss out on opportunities to really be able to affect people for the better if we're ignoring those opportunities.
It's so hard though, that line of not wanting to offend or step on toes, especially in the world that we live in today, where you're always constantly being offensive, politically offensive, or whatever. And so there's this it's not okay anymore to say, hey, what you're doing is hurting yourself, and I want to help you. It's very judgmental. It's very condemning if I dare try to say, hey, what you're doing, your behavior is going to hurt you in the end. But the truth is that often it's the most loving thing to do, is to say, hey, my friend, I care about you enough that you're going to probably dislike me for a while, but you know that I'm here to fight for you. And I think that's what Daniel is trying to show here. All this came upon King Nebuchadnezzar at the end of the 12 months. He was walking about the royal palace of Babylon. Can you imagine what it was like for him to write this? It came true, guys. The king spoke, saying, is not this the great Babylon that I have built for a royal dwelling for my mighty power and for the honor of my majesty? While the word was still in the king's mouth, a voice fell from heaven, King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken, the kingdom has departed from you. And they shall drive you from men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts in the field. They shall make you eat grass like oxen, and 7 times you shall pass over you, until you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and gives it to whoever he chooses. That very hour the word was fulfilled concerning Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven from men, and ate grass like oxen. His body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hair had grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like bird's claws. Kind of a crazy picture of a man right now, to turn into a beast where you're eating grass and you don't move so much that you have dew. No, that's just morning time dew. And then you have hair like eagle's feathers and nails like bird's claws. It's not a pretty picture of a man right now.
So one thing that I think we're discussing before is that a lot of times these kings were ruled by fear and paranoia. That was literally the only way they were able to stay alive. There were always other people vouching for their throne and trying to grab and usurp them, and so they're always this very paranoid. It was always a very paranoid way of rulership, and you kind of see that in earlier with Daniel. A very balanced, calm person isn't going to threaten to kill people off the bat, and they're not going to say, "Oh, I'm going to make your house into an ash heap," or "I'm going to kill your entire family," stuff like that. And I think that we think, oh, God is the one that is causing all these things to happen. But if you really think about it, if the amount of stress that Nebuchadnezzar is having on his shoulders from having to run this huge empire and being careful about backstabbers, it's no wonder that this didn't happen sooner.
Mm-hmm.
And so we see Nebuchadnezzar kind of going crazy, and we might think, oh, that's God doing it to him. Or we could see it as this was going to happen all along, but God was just holding it back.
Well, it's not actually that crazy to have madmen as rulers. It was just sometimes hidden. There was Roman emperors who, did sexual acts with their animals or put a horse in the Senate. There are stories of other rulers that have had madmen tendencies. It's just their ruling officials have helped them rule their kingdom.
Yeah.
And so it just happens that we get the inside look into, hey, this is also happening.
Yeah.
But stress can make people do some crazy things. I think we can all identify with that. And Nebuchadnezzar, at this point, we don't know for sure, but we know in total he rules for 42 years.
Yeah.
That's a lot of time to be in charge of such an incredible, great kingdom. I mean, many ancient archaeologists are astounded by Babylon.
Yeah.
His garden is one of the ancient wonders. Babylon is definitely a feat of incredible beauty and power.
Yeah.
And I think this kind of pride that he tried to build up, like, oh, I have done this is my, and that clashing with the paranoia that he also had and all that stress is just meant to crumble. That's how you become a madman.
Yeah. And I think also you see God is giving a lot of grace. He didn't immediately bring down the result of the dream. He gave Nebuchadnezzar 12 months, a whole year to really kind of change his ways. And we see at the end of those 12 months, it wasn't enough. And Nebuchadnezzar hadn't really changed his course.
Well, not only that, but giving him the dream in the first place.
Yeah. That's merciful to begin with.
Wait, I'm reaching out to you.
Yeah.
And I think God, if we're all honest with ourselves, there are many times that God has been seeking after us. And God has been pursuing us, trying to have a relationship with us in many different ways. But Satan loves to block that out. And in the secular world, we all are happy to notice when, for example, if you're gonna buy a car, if you're gonna buy a Nissan Versa, you're like, oh, I don't hardly see any of those. But when you're going to buy one, all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's one, and you just start noticing them because by what you notice, by what you focus on, that's what you notice. And so if we choose to be like, oh, man, God is not working in my life, well, then we're not going to notice. But if we choose to be like, wait, is God working in my life? Then we're going to see that. You really choose so many things by what you focus. The news chooses what to show us, so we are led a certain way, So our focus really decides in many ways where we will end up. Verse 34, and at the end of the time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my understanding returned to me, and I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing. He does according to his will in the army of heaven, and among the inhabitants of the earth. No one can restrain his hand, or say to him, what have you done? At the same time, my reason returned to me, and for the glory of my kingdom, my honor and splendor returned to me. My counselors and nobles restored it to me. I was restored to my kingdom, and excellent majesty was added to me. Excellent majesty. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all of whose works are truth and his ways justice. And those who walk in pride he is able to put down.
Wow. I just think these last 4 verses are just crazy. Nebuchadnezzar starts out at the beginning of this book as this, vindictive ruler who just rules with an iron fist, and now we see his personal testimony is being proclaimed to nations, different languages, and he's saying, he's blessing the Most High, blessing and honoring God. And he says, God's kingdom is from generation to generation. He's the one that lifts up kings and puts down kings. And just the last one, and those who walk in pride, he's able to put down. That basically sums up his personal testimony. And like you were saying earlier, we can choose to focus on the, saying, oh, is God really working in people's lives? Or, we can focus on these types of stories where we definitely see God working in the life of a pagan king. And he didn't just want to stop with this one person. He wanted this testimony to go out to thousands more people, millions, so that they'd be able to also have this personal relationship with God.
What I think is really cool is that all his where was it? All his counselors and nobles were restored to him. Like he got back his kingdom and even a bit more. And you might wonder like how does that even make sense? Because if you're ruling on paranoia, because people always want to take the throne. As soon as the throne is empty, it isn't empty anymore. And how come? Because God said in his dream that I will leave the stump. And one idea that I think really resonates with this is that Daniel was kind of the prime minister there. You can see earlier that he was put in the gate of the king, like he was one of the most high there. And while Nebuchadnezzar was out, being an ox and eating grass and everything, Daniel was there saying, it's kind of okay, he will come back, but now we'll just make everything function and everything will be great. And I think that's amazing. Like God has people everywhere and he keeps his promises.
I think, and it's a testimony to Nebuchadnezzar himself, because he must have come back as a changed man too, to have the honor and splendor returned to him, and the counselors and nobles restored it to me. Like they trusted him again. They're willing to be like, I'll let a madman be a king. And how many years before, how many years after, nobody knows. But it's incredible to me that excellent majesty was added to me. It's often when we are humbled that we actually are exalted the most, which I think is also the point of the cross, where Jesus was at his weakest, according to the world, looking, and he was physically at his weakest, but he's looking like at his lowest point. But Jesus at his lowest point is at the highest point, because he's exalted and he's proven, hey, my character is true. When I tell you I love you, I mean it. And this is what love looks like. And I think that we need to be reminded that in our humblest moments is actually where we are actually the most highly exalted, because it's where it's proof that God is shining through us. Another thing too is just simply the fact that I think we can't close without saying the fact that we need to understand that God does intervene at different times, and God does allow and God does not allow. And we can spend hours trying to figure out, why does he allow this ruler, I mean, this makes it pretty clear that he does according to his will in the army of heaven, and he does seem to allow certain kingdoms to rise up and certain kingdoms to fall. So that begs the question, you have Mussolini, you have Hitler, you have Saddam Hussein, you can go on and on with all the different leaders. Why would God allow different people to come in and come out? No one's to know for certain, but for sure we do know one thing, is that if we choose to look, God is working on behalf. Because this story, there's not room enough to do all the historical accounts of God intervening with the Chinese emperors, or over here, and the Native Americans. But God is trying to show you that he's working through his people to be a blessing to all. And so here he's choosing to work through Nebuchadnezzar, then known as the highest ruler. And if he's going to do it, Nebuchadnezzar, do you not think that he tried with Hitler? Do you not think that he's trying with all the leaders to be like, look, I want to use you. I want to use you to show my character to your nation. He's not just he's involved everywhere he can, but to know when and why is just not a question we can answer.
And I think it's because we're only seeing one fraction of this whole controversy with so many different moving parts. Like God, the way he operates is by honoring our free will, and you have so many different human wills at play, and how does God navigate through all of that while still trying to make his will be done, And I think that it just goes to show that God, it's almost a little bit scary how much God does honor our free choice, because he allows our free choice to have consequences. And, I think that every day the choices we make affect other people, and God allows that to happen. Like obviously, yes, like you're saying, like God intervenes in amazing ways in so many different instances throughout history and in our lives today, but God is always honoring free will. And I think that until we get to the other side of eternity, we're really not going to be able to know why all the different answers are. And I think just like we were talking about before, we can always focus on the negative things, like, oh, I think God isn't working here and this is why. Or we can focus on the ways that we do see God working and the ways that he's worked in the past.
And I guess just to close, unless you guys have anything else to add, do you have anything else?
I just think it's an amazing testimony, and this really shows the power of testimonies. and this is also the kingmaker testimony to, like, in the beginning it said to all people, nations, and languages, and testimony is one of the most powerful weapons we have, and that we really should use them, that everybody have a story that they should share.
Yeah, and I guess that's the challenge we want to leave with you guys tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. We just want you to know that you have a testimony to share. Please know that your story is needed by someone else. And though you may not be the grandest king of the world, neither are we, but we're so thankful that God is choosing to intervene and work in our lives. And I know that in sharing how God has worked in my life, it's been a blessing to others. And so we just want to encourage you to come join the ARM journey. Check out our website, leave a testimony how God is working in your life. Ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Leave a comment. But just thank you so much for choosing to spend time in Daniel. We hope that you continue to study on your own and just realize that God is longing to have an intimate relationship with you, and peace be multiplied to you.
See you later.